Hey everyone, welcome back to AI with Pallavi. Ready to learn another AWS service in just 10 minutes? Let's get started. Let's learn AWS EKS. So, Kubernetes is one of those things where the API itself is genuinely great. Declarative, portable, huge ecosystem. Nobody is arguing with that part. The part nobody warns you about is everything underneath the API. Running the control plane, keeping etcd alive, surviving a version upgrade without breaking half your workloads. That's a real job, sometimes a whole team's job. EKS doesn't change what Kubernetes is, it changes who's on call for the part you never actually wanted to own. Let's go through exactly what that means. So, say you decide to just run Kubernetes yourself. What does that actually look like day to day? You're running the control plane across three availability zones and keeping it reachable when one goes down. You're backing up at CD, and critically, you're actually testing that restore because lose quorum there and you've lost the entire cluster, not just a node. Kubernetes ships a new release roughly every 4 months. That's your upgrade to plan and survive every time. You're provisioning nodes, joining them, patching AMIs, draining them safely. You're wiring pods to IAM yourself. None of that's native to vanilla Kubernetes, and you're picking and operating a CNI just to make pod networking actually work inside your VPC. None of that is your application. It's a price of admission for the Kubernetes API, and it's a genuinely full time commitment before you have deployed a single workload. So this is where you get self-managed Kubernetes and it is actually a full-time team. But now let's look at what you actually get if you start using AWS EKS, right? Control plane. AWS runs it across three AZs, patches it, backs it up. Flat 10 cents an hour per cluster. Compute, you get real choices now. Manage node groups if you want control. Fargate if you want zero node management, or auto mode where EKS provisions and rotates the nodes for you entirely. Upgrades get a lot less scary. One click version bumps, plus insights that flag deprecated APIs before you pull the trigger. So, pod level IAM, that's pod identity or IRSA, map a role straight to a pod, networking, real VPC IPs on your pods, and an ingress resource that just provisions a real ALB for you. And your core add ons like core DNS, the CNI, the EBS driver, all version managed instead of those YAML you are tracking yourself. So here's the honest way to think about this. EKS doesn't make Kubernetes simpler. The API is exactly as complex as it always was. But what EKS removes is the operational tax of keeping the lights on underneath it. So you are shifting the weight of managing the control plane to EKS itself. Let's look at the difference between ECS versus EKS because this is the major part where everyone is majorly confused, right? And I get this question constantly: ECS or EKS, which one should I actually use? My honest answer would be it's not about which one's more popular. Look at what you are actually trading, like control plane cost. ECS charges you nothing for the orchestrator. EKS is 10 cents an hour before a single node runs. Learning curve, ECS, you're productive in a day. EKS, pods, RBAC, ingress, CRDs, that's genuinely weeks. And it doesn't really stop, right? And ecosystem is where EKS pulls ahead hard, like Helm, operators, service mesh, the entire CNCF landscape versus whatever AWS ships natively for ECS. And portability, this is the big one. EKS manifests run on any conformant Kubernetes, any cloud, like on-prem, wherever. So ECS is AWS only, and that's a deliberate trade, not just a limitation. So here's my actual take. If your team is AWS committed and wants to ship this quarter, ECS. If you've got real Kubernetes fluency already or portability is a genuine requirement and not just a hope, you need to use EKS. So you need to pick based on what you actually need, not what shows up more on the internet, right? So choose ECS when the team is AWS committed and choose EKS when you have real Kubernetes fluency. So that's how it flows. Now let's look at an architecture flow of a single request which is going through EKS. Basically, we are tracing a request here through an actual cluster because this is actually where the AWS versus you split really clicks. So if you see the dashed line, that's a boundary that matters. Above it, the control plane, AWS is running that entirely. Below it, the data plane, your nodes, your pods, that's yours. A request comes in, it hits your ALB, which got provision from a Kubernetes ingress resource, not something you clicked together by hand. That routes to a service which picks a healthy pod, two pods here spread across two availability zones, each one with a real VPC IP thanks to the CNI, not some overlay network you have to debug separately. So, this is a simplistic way. The pod actually pulls its image from ECR, and if it needs to talk to S3 or DynamoDB, that's the pod identity, handling the token exchange, scope to that specific pod. Not some broad node level, everything else shares, right? And running underneath all of it is the container insights, so the observability. So it's always there, and it helps you to get the logs, both flowing straight into CloudWatch. So this is how an EKS request looks like. Let's see where the EKS actually fits in, right? So let's look at the use cases. One, an internal developer platform. Multiple teams, one cluster, namespaces plus RBAC, and quotas give each team its own self-service slice. Your platform team owns one cluster instead of 30 separate control planes, 30 upgrade cycles, 30 builds. Two, and honestly, this is the strongest argument for EKS, hybrid and multi-cloud. Same manifest, same help charts, deploy to EKS in one region, EKS anywhere on-prem, or another cloud entirely. So that's your choice. That's the one thing ECS structurally cannot offer you, so that's it. Third one, ML training and GPU batch work. This is important with the AI world and how you really want to run your AI workloads. So watch this timeline. Idle overnight, scale to zero, then a training burst spins up a full GPU fleet in under a minute thanks to Karpenter, and scales back down the second job's done. You're not paying for expensive GPU nodes sitting idle, so that's the best part, right? And fourth one, migrating an existing Kubernetes setup. If you've already got Helm charts running somewhere else, on-prem or another cloud, they basically just works here. So you don't have to do a lot of heavy lifting there and a lot of customization because it works anywhere. And that's an infrastructure move, not actually a rewrite. Now, there are important decisions you really need to make when you are actually looking for EKS. Three decisions, and the first one honestly decides whether you should even be having this conversation. So, does your team already run Kubernetes in production? If yes, go EKS. The expertise is already paid for, you're just dropping the operational burden. And if no, and I mean generally no platform engineer, no one who lives in kubectl day to day, start with ECS instead. Adopting Kubernetes to run three containers is a net loss. You can always migrate later, and it's still just containers underneath, right? Nothing else. The second one is who should own your node lifecycle? In 2026, auto mode is honestly the same default. AWS provisions, patches, and rotates nodes for you. Carpenter's is built in. Only go with managed node group yourself if you need custom EMIs or you have already committed to reserved instances or you actually need strict control over exactly when nodes get replaced. The third one, how varied and bursty are your pod shapes? If they're all over the place, Carpenter, notes ready in under a minute, spans the whole EC2 catalog, including spot and graviton. If everything basically uniform, cluster or autoscaler is simpler enough, but just slower. 3 to 4 minutes to scale up instead of one. Though honestly, if you're on auto mode, this decision already made for you. So it uses Carpenter, right? So you don't have to take a decision there. It already uses Carpenter. Now let's go ahead and look at the console. I already have a cluster created. Once you create a cluster, these are the resources which you can see. You have pods, which are the smallest unit in the cluster, which you can see are created. Then if you want to create some replica sets, you can see the replica sets as well. And you will get some more details about the replica sets when you go underneath, right? So all this information will be visible to you. And you can say this is the desired replica, max replicas, and revision. So that's how you can change these details. Then the API services which are created, right? Authentication, extension, certificates, then different component status like controller manager, etcd, scheduler. You can have different nodes once created, the priority class. Also, for networking, you can see different endpoints being created. Then you have ingresses which have been created. Then there are config secrets, storage, whichever storage you mentioned, the device class, the storage classes, and all those information will be there. Authentication, how you mentioned the details, service accounts, if any created, so you can see there are multiple service accounts created, and then authorization, extensions, if you want to use any extensions, right? So all of those information will be present. For example, I have custom resource definitions, so I've mentioned those here. Then comes the compute. If you have created node pools, right, general purpose system, then EKS node classes I'm using here. I have not defined any target profile, so you cannot see here. Then the networking part is very critical. What is a VPC you are using, the service IP, the subnets you are using, whether it is spanned across multi-AZ or not, and the add-ons, right? So I only have a metric server add-on, but you can have more, so you can get more add-ons as well. There are a lot of add-ons which are actually useful, right? Like CloudWatch observability, Hyperpod inference. If you're running any SageMaker task, then you have defined add-ons there as well. So all of this information is already present. You can just go ahead and access it. The deployment is via Argo CD. How you want to create it, it's definitely your choice. Then update history and backup. We have not updated it now, but all of that information comes here. You also get observability configuration if you want to create CloudWatch logs and others. So all of this is already present in the console. So that's what you can see from the control plane, but there are more things which you can see definitely from the data plane as well. But for that, you need to log into your cluster, you need to run the kubectl commands, and you can get started. But that is how the overview of EKS is. We have discussed about what the service is all about, why it is useful, the difference between EKS and ECS. So this will definitely help you to get started. And EKS is not a service just for theory, so there's a lot of hands-on involved. So let me know in the comments if you want to know something very specific to EKS, or you have any questions around running that in production, and we'll definitely answer to that. Happy learning!
And just like that, you have learned another AWS service in 10 minutes. Hit that subscribe button if you like this video, and comment if you have any questions related to this service, or if there is any service you want me to focus next. Happy learning!